Uh, Welcome to my beautiful wife, Paulette. She's right here again today. Also, my bevy of cousins, Bernie, Penny, and Nat. They're always following me around for protection. Many thanks to the American Legion for allowing us to host these programs for the past 9 years, a little bit more than 9 years. They afford us the absolutely perfect venue for what we do. And thanks so much to the wait staff who do such a great job every day. And so please be generous with the servers. They're working hard today because they're a little bit understaffed. I'd like to thank Cats TV for recording our programs for the last 6 years, which really made a huge difference to us. It's a very important service because it allows us to upload each program to YouTube for people who can't make it to the live programs. In addition, it allows these great local history lectures to be preserved for all those who follow us to view. How many new attendees? Because I see some new faces, I think. Raise your hand. Yeah. If any of you want to get on our regular mailing list, people that are not always on Facebook, you can stop by and give me your email address, and that way you can be notified that way of any upcoming programs. Firstly, I'd like to introduce Daniel Schlegel, Director of the Monroe County History Center. He has a few words.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. I had a couple things. I brought a book up, but it's very dark, so I'll just point to the cover that just happens to be on the screen right here. But we have several of Dr. Madison's books for sale, both this one and 2 other titles that he has authored. So if you are interested or want to learn more, feel free. We are all the way down here on this, to my left side, most of your right side. We have a number of books for sale, including some of the past presenters. So, and then before I forget, we also, one of our board members was not able to make it. We are having our big garage sale in June of this year, and so I have some flyers. So if anyone needs to get rid of some stuff, if you need to downsize, if you want to clear out someone else's closet in the house, whatever the case may be, we don't ask too many questions. But I do have some flyers, so if you are curious about what is accepted, please stop by and let me know. After the presentation, I'll be down here by the books where I always am. But please feel free. Stop by and see me. I have a bunch of these flyers I am more than happy to hand out to anybody, or feel free to call the History Center or check our website. And then the last thing I have today is I just wanted to say thank you to everyone. There have been a number of people after these presentations that come by and see us at the History Center to either see the different exhibits we have that change, or they come in and say, I saw some of the books and they looked really neat, so we came back so we can look at all the rest of what you have here. And some people have even bought memberships, and I can't tell you how much we appreciate that from the History Center. That Michael Carter's on our board. Here he is. He almost didn't see him. I was like, he's a ghost. He disappeared. But he's on our board. He does so much work for us, and he's the one that allowed us. When I talked to him, he was like, yeah, sure, come on by. So we try to help promote it. So I know some people have seen our promotions at the History Center and come here, and vice versa. So I just want to say thank you. All that support really does mean a lot, and we are here for the community as well. And so actually, when I was talking with the presenter earlier, and I forget who else was that talking with us, but we were just saying when the community all works together, everyone benefits, and it makes it better for everyone. And what Michael Carter's done with the History Club and everyone that's helped with that, it's been really great. And I've been learning. I love coming to these because I learned so much, and everyone's so friendly. So thank you for everything. We hope to see you at the History Center in future presentations, and let us know if you have any questions. Thank you, everyone. And if you have not ordered and you need to order, just raise your hand and the staff will be around.
You don't count. I'll be right back. I'll be right back.
So thanks, Daniel. Real quickly, I'll just go down the coming events. very briefly. May 31st, John Baton, I think I'm pronouncing his name right, a program called Reconstructing Bloomington. What would it have looked like to walk through Bloomington in 1907? I think that's pretty fascinating to even think about. We had a cancellation for June 28th, but I was lucky enough to go to a program at the History Center given by Dr. Roger Robeson, and it's on the early origins of Hoosier hysteria. So he goes back to the very beginnings of Indiana high school basketball. And I'm a basketball fan, but for this program, you wouldn't have to be to enjoy it. He really does a good job with it. So I'm glad that we could get him to step in there. July 26th, Derek Ritchie will do a program on the Laboratory and Hunter mansions, which are both long gone. August 30th, John Summerlot, an IU professor, will give a program called Arbutus Mania that swept Bloomington and IU in the early 1900s. I knew nothing about this. It spawned the yearbook name, among other things. September 27th, Brad Cook of IU Photo Archives, who's been here before, will show more vintage photos of Bloomington. October 25th, Hillary Fleck will return from the History Center to give a program called Highlights from the Herald Times Archive Photo Collection. Several of us went and archived thousands of photos down there from the years 1957 through 1969, and we left off there. Since that time, the HT has donated all their negatives to the History Center, and they're going to continue starting around 1970 and do their own scanning, and then she'll show a lot of them right here. November 29th, Marge Faber, who's here, will do a history of the local post offices. December 27th, Clay Stuckey, old faithful Clay, who's done I don't know how many programs, eight at least. Bits, Pieces, and Curiosities of Monroe County Railroad. January 31st, Al Parker, a wildlife biologist, will give a program on the history of the bald eagle, reintroduction to Lake Monroe. That's a little different. February 28th, Christine Friesel will give a program called On Kirkwood in 1967. She came across a whole bunch of photos, never seen lately anyway, that she's going to show. March is open. Let's see. April's open, March is open. May 30th, this one's a little bit different too. It's called The History of the Dry Stack Stone Walls in Monroe County. And you know they're all over the place, built some of them in the 30s and some of them way before that. And I had never thought of a program on that, but I think it's a great idea. And June 27th, James Capshew of IU will give a program on the life and times of Herman B. Wells. That brings us to today. It's indeed a pleasure to have a speaker like Jim Madison here today. I've been after him for quite some time. He's a busy guy. We finally got a time period that fit in, so we're so glad to have him here. This program is called the Ku Klux Klan in the Heartland, and my pal Clay Stuckey says, don't take too many words to introduce somebody. Just introduce them and get on with the program. So that's what I'll do. Here's Jim Madison.
That is my kind of introduction. Thank you, Michael. That's my kind of introduction. Can you hear me? Are we okay on sound? No. Why not? What must I do? Must I hold it? Really, really close like this? Oh, my goodness. All right. That was, I just said that was a great introduction, my kind of introduction. But more seriously, I want to give a shout out to Michael Carter for all the work that he does in organizing this. And from my experience, he's an expert at it. He could do this for a living if he had to. Most of us are on pro bono work these days and enjoying it. I have a lot of good slides here, folks, and if you can't see the screen very well, perhaps you want to move. If you want to move your chair, that's perfectly okay, because I hope you can see the screens and let's see what else I wanted to do. My father was a World War II veteran and belonged to the Legion and the VFW, and I got a scholarship to go to college from them. It was It was really pretty helpful in my family. So I walked in here remembering that. But you know, most of us are old enough, wherever we go, we remember something, don't we? We remember our favorite road in Monroe County, some of us, you know, that road. Okay, I didn't grow up here, let me divulge it, but I moved to Bloomington like Herb Schreiner. You remember Herb Schreiner? As soon as I heard about it, I moved to Bloomington. It was 1966, and boy, was it a different place. Holy cow. All right, enough of that. Let's get down to the business. I got some serious stuff to do. I'm going to talk for about an hour, maybe less if I can. But you know, 40 years in the classroom left behind a serious verbal disease. But I do want to have some time, if you're interested, for conversation, for comment, for disagreement. You don't have to believe a word I say. I'm going to talk about a very difficult subject and talk about memory. What do we do? This is a question that's kind of obsessing me these days. What do we do with memories that are not happy stories? We have lots of happy stories in our personal lives and in our lives as citizens of this county and of this nation. My favorite story has to do with Abraham Lincoln, who's the greatest American of all time. I will not debate that comment. He is the greatest American of all time. Not up for debate. Wonderful stories in our history. But in our history, we have other kinds of stories, stories of tragedy, stories that make us feel sad and uncomfortable, and some people want to take those stories and whistle in the dark and pretend that they don't exist, okay? That's a kind of human reaction. We all do that. Some of us want to make up stories to camouflage and hide the unhappy stories. I call it fake history. Some people call it patriotic history, or comfort history, I call it. Like the bedtime stories we tell our grandkids to make them go to sleep. Feel-good history. That's just not going to work. It never did work, and it's especially not going to work today if you're paying any attention to what's going on around us. So here we have it. All 92 counties in Indiana had a clavern, the local organization of the Klan. Some had several, more than one. What is this? Whoa. Did I miss a slide? Yeah, sorry. The question, one of the many big questions, I'm going to talk about some details of the Klan, but I want to encourage you to think about the big questions, the big issues, how this connects more broadly to our history, to our culture, to our past and our present. One of the big questions is this: is the Klan a kind of fluke event that came out of nowhere and means nothing of consequence and therefore we can forget it? Or was it a mainstream organization? Is it at the center of our history? And therefore we need to think about it seriously. Here's the first sentence of my book. The Ku Klux Klan was as dark as the night, evil, and as American as apple pie. Now that may sound like a contradiction, but I conclude that is not a contradiction. Here they are in 1924, walking down Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C., proud, good Americans. We have to clear a little bit of detail here. There are three clans in our history. The first we're not going to talk about. That's the Klan of Confederate losers. Remember, they lost the war? And if they had not lost the war, oh my goodness, what would this country be? They were not happy about it. They tried to turn the clock back. They tried to keep African Americans in their place through terror, et cetera, et cetera. That's the Klan of the late 1860s and 70s. The third Klan, I'll have a little bit to say about at the end, the Klan that began in the 1960s. The Klan I want to focus on is the Klan of the 1920s and the Klan in Indiana. Now, it's not Indiana only. This Klan in the 1920s began in Atlanta, Georgia, and spread across the Ohio River and from Atlantic to Pacific. It was very powerful in Pennsylvania. It was very powerful in Oregon. It was very powerful in other states, but no state, I think, we don't have great comparative numbers, but it's likely that in no state was the Klan more powerful than in the state of Indiana. A basic question is who joined? In the old days, the myth said, you still hear it, that they were the ne'er-do-wells, the hillbillies. A reporter came out from New York and wrote a wonderful article in the 1920s about the Indiana Klan people and said they were the great unteachables. I love that label. The great unteachables who joined the Klan. If that were true, and then we good people, we're all teachable, we could write them off. They're really not us. The problem is it's not true. I think I missed a slide there. They were not rubes. They were not dupes led by artful dodgers. They were mainstream Hoosiers. They were good Hoosiers. They were churchwomen and businessmen and Lions Club members and, yes, American Legion members. The Legion of the Klan formed at the same time, and there was a relationship in the 1920s between the American Legion and the Ku Klux Klan. Good Hoosiers, church ministers from all walks of life, not the great unteachables. They were bound together by a trilogy, a triangle. They were white, they were native-born, and they were Protestant. And because of those three attributes, they concluded, they believed fervently that they were 100% Americans. Now, I'd like to ask you to think about that label, 100% American. To my sense, it's a dangerous label. It creates all kinds of problems. And something else I want to say about this slide, sorry. This insignia, this is the insignia of the Klan that they wore over their heart on their robes. And it's full of Christian meaning. At the center, most importantly, is a drop of blood that Christ shed. This Ku Klux Klan of the 1920s was many things. It was a religious organization among many things, and people of, I believe, genuine religious faith. I put this slide in because I love this photograph so much. It has nothing to do with the Klan, except these are people of deep religious belief participating, two at least, in a baptism in a creek in southern Indiana in February. Serious. The Ku Klux Klan and the Protestant churches, the mainstream churches, Methodists, Disciples of Christ, Baptists, etc., formed an alliance, a partnership. Each believed that it was to the benefit to form a relationship with the other, the Klan and the Protestant churches. And here we have one of the best symbols of that relationship. On many a Sunday morning across Indiana, robed Klansmen would enter a Protestant church, march down the center aisle up to the altar, place a cash offering on the altar, as the congregation and choir sang "Onward, Christian Soldiers," the great hymn of Indiana's Klan. Here's another example of Protestant-Klan relationship, a Klan funeral. I wrote an article about Klan funerals. It sounds strange, but when you understand the Indiana Klan of the 1920s, it's not at all strange. These are Klan women burying one of their own. The casket has her Klan robe on the top as they recite the Protestant, I don't know what denomination this is, let's just say Methodist, that's a good guess, the Methodist ritual of burial and the Klan ritual of burial, because the Klan had their own ritual for funeral services. Some of you may have seen this picture unearthed recently of a Klan funeral nearby us here. What the Klan did with brilliance and sophistication was create a dichotomy of us and them. Us are 100% Americans. Them, people less than 100%, 68%, 22%, some 0% who will never become 100% Americans. And I begin with the greatest enemy of them all, the Catholic Church. Now, I spoke to high school students in Evansville last week. I was in 6 classrooms. Boy, do those teachers work hard. It's not like this in a classroom, in a high school classroom, let me tell you. But I saw firsthand phenomenal public school teachers and good students eager to learn. So whatever people are telling you about what's going on in the schools out there, it may not be entirely true. Thank you. I got off track, sorry. You all, I hope, remember, let's say, the 1960 election when a Catholic ran for president, and in parts of Indiana and America, they were, whoa, we want a cat. He's going to call the Pope the first day in the White House. And he was Irish, too. Anti-Catholicism goes back to the very beginning, to Puritan New England. In fact, it comes across the Atlantic on the ships. Anti-Catholicism was deep in American Protestant culture. I grew up with it in my family. Deep. And it's very hard to explain today, thank goodness, because there's very little of it today. But the Catholics were the Klan's greatest enemy because there were so many of them, because they were so strange and different and had these celibate priests and a pope in Rome and all sorts of other strange and weird things that were a threat to America. This is real. I'm not making this up. I'm a historian, and so we deal in evidence, primary sources, etc. Primary sources. I love the second one. 100,000 Negroes. There are hardly 100,000 Negroes in Indiana in 1923 to become Catholic priests. Another one of the many conspiracies these folks are up to. Us and them. Enemy. Immigrants. Not all immigrants so much, but immigrants especially, the new immigrants who are pouring into America in 1900, 1910, 1920, from Poland, from Romania, from Sicily. These people, let's say the way they said it, those people, you know, when someone says, those people, you want to do what Charles Dickens told us to do. Start counting your spoons because they're gonna do something. They're gonna take something from you. The truth. Those people, those immigrants, are not 100% Americans. They don't look like us. They don't talk like us. Their food's different. They'll never become real Americans. And so we got to keep them out. And so in 1924, Congress passed maybe the most important immigration act in our history that set up a quota system. Large numbers from Northern and Western Europe, very small numbers of immigrants allowed in from Eastern and Southern Europe, and none from Asia. A quota system. And the Klan was delighted to take responsibility. There were many sources of it, but the Klan loved to take responsibility for that act. There it is. Closing the door to these new immigrants. And of course, you know, Jews are on the list of enemies. Us and them, those people, those Jews. And you can go on and on. Another deep American tradition that was there at the very, very beginning. One of the great Klan speakers and organizers and recruiters was a woman, a Quaker minister, Daisy Douglas Barr. And she went around Indiana speaking. I don't know if she spoke in Bloomington, but I know she spoke in lots of other towns. And she was a marvel speaking. She also became vice president of the Indiana Republican Party. And here she's talking, I'm quoting her here, talking about a planned boycott of Jewish businesses in Indianapolis. One of the standard Klan ways of talking. They didn't often carry it out, not successfully, for all sorts of reasons, but they talked it. They talked it. Us and them, enemies, those people, of course, Black Americans, African Americans are on the list. They're not the most important. The common assumption is that the enemy of the Klan is African Americans. True, 50 years ago and today, but not true in the 1920s. African Americans were kept in their place from the very beginning in all sorts of ways. Klan didn't need to pay much attention to them, but they've, of course, never going to become 100% Americans. I put on the screen here this great, great American film, Birth of a Nation. I don't think you could show it in public these days, unfortunately. It is full of the most terrible, horrible, racist stereotypes. It is disgusting to our mind. But in 1915, when it was made, in 1924, when the Klan showed it across Indiana in Main Street movie theaters and in church sanctuaries, white Protestant Native Borg Americans loved it. Woodrow Wilson, as president, loved it. I want to acknowledge that the Klan picks up on these enemies out of the air. The Klan did not create these enemies. All of them had been on the enemies list for a long, long time. What the Klan did was to amplify them, to put them on a loudspeaker, to spread them, intensify them, make it more acceptable to designate such people as enemies. Segregation is not new with the Klan. It intensifies in the 1920s. This is the time when segregated public high schools are built in Evansville, Indianapolis, and Gary, Indiana. Crispus Attucks, the most important, well, I shouldn't say that, among them. And it's a time when schools have been segregated for a long time. And let's go close to home. I'm very proud of this marker for the colored school in Bloomington. I was among 6 or 8 people who did the work to get this marker and raise the money. And I'd like to give you an assignment today, form into groups of 5, go out there and create a new official historical marker in Monroe County. We have some, we need a hell of a lot more. We need markers that acknowledge our heroes and our successes, and we markers like this one that acknowledge our failures. So you walk by, going to Daniel's wonderful, wonderful History Center in the old Carnegie Library. You walk by the site of the colored school in Bloomington, and yes, in Bloomington, Indiana. And maybe most of you know this, but most people do not know this. So this is, one of my friends says, this is a stick in the eye, a reminder, a public marker. These are the enemies. Put them on a raft and sink them in the middle of the ocean. Now, there's another ingredient I want to add to this stew pot that I'm making here of Klan enemies, and that is the ingredient of science. The best scientists of the day in the 1920s at Yale and Harvard and IU, as well as Stanford, came to the conclusion on the basis of bogus research. The technical name for this research today is BS. I won't say the word because people are always offended when you use bad words. That there was a hierarchy of races. And of course that white folks were at the very top of the hierarchy, and then in abilities and quality of life, moral turpitude and whatever, you go down the hierarchy on the basis of skin color, and you get to the bottom, and these are where the African people are, the dark people are, the Negroes, the colored people at the very bottom. A hierarchy of races based on science, and oh, did the Klan love this science. And they wrote about it, and they incorporated it into their stuff. Related to this is the notion that the white race is being overwhelmed by colored peoples of all sorts, lesser peoples, race decline, an idea, both these ideas, the scientific hierarchy of race and racial decline, are out there, I need not tell you, in America today. Just to make sure we're on the page here, the scientists who work in what used to be Jordan Hall, that's another story, isn't it? The scientists at IU and elsewhere will tell you that there's no such thing biologically as race. This is still news to most Americans, but it's old news to scientists. The racial differences are so small, so slight, as to be mostly inconsequential. Race is a cultural construct. That means we create in our minds this notion of difference based upon skin color and other physical characteristics, and we ascribe to that racial category that we make up all sorts of qualities or lack of qualities. So we create race, and it's mostly white people who have created race and made white the default color, and any other color is just the kind of marginal color. I need to take care of the question about violence in the Klan. And this is old-timers at IU especially, maybe remember Bill Wilson, who was in the English department, and a wonderful guy, and wrote an article, and coming back, he was a student at Harvard, came back to his hometown in Evansville, where his father was a congressman, in the summer of 1924. The article in American Heritage is online, you can read it, it's a wonderful piece of writing. And he writes about what was happening, about the fear that was in the air, the fear of violence, that someone soaped on his window screen KKK. It's like Halloween, only the Klan is not playing games. But Bill reports no violence against his father, who was running for re-election, or anyone else that he knew in Evansville. And that is generally true across the state. The Klan bombed a Catholic home, parsonage kind of home in northern Indiana. There was no one hurt, but there was some significant damage to the building. A few other examples. Klan members took men who abused their wives out and gave them a beating, put switches on their front porch, pulled up to park cars out on county roads and shone a flashlight inside and got two people out of that car and dressed properly. But no violence, and particularly no lynching. I've had a standing bet for years of $100 to anyone who can show me good primary source evidence of a lynching by anyone, of anyone in Indiana in the 1920s. The Klan lynched no one, no lynchings, no murders, no documented evidence of any of this kind of violence. There was a lynching in Indiana in 1930, but it was not a Klan lynching. I wrote a book about that lynching, and you can read it. It's in the public library, I think, if you want to read about that lynching in 1930. But the Klan lynched no one. And here's why, because it connects to the larger picture of the Klan. These were good Hoosiers. Good Hoosiers didn't go around doing violence. And in particular, the Klan leaders said to them, don't engage in violence. It will not serve our purpose. Our purpose is to be mainstream Americans. Our purpose is to have power in other ways. Sure, we can intimidate people. We can make sure they're afraid of us and respectful of us. That's what our robe and hood is about. That's some of our other activities are about. And the Klan very much intimidated people. You know, a robe, a hood is still frightening today. It's an image that creates fear today. Testimony to the brilliance of the Klan in the 1920s. Now, the Klan was not just about enemies. The Klan was a do-good organization, a moral reform organization, and there were so many sins out there. Where do you begin? It's the Roaring Twenties, remember? The number one sin for many, if not most of those who joined the Klan was alcohol. Prohibition's in effect. The law of the land is you can't buy, sell, consume a drop of alcohol legally. You think Americans obeyed that? Many did, maybe most. But the disobeyers were a large minority, and booze ran freely. In Indiana, down from Chicago, across from Canada, et cetera, bootleggers had a field day. And there were saloons and blind tigers and all sorts of other ways in which to get a drink. It infuriated the Klan. It infuriated them because the law authorities, the sheriff, the policemen, were not often enforcing the prohibition laws. In fact, in many cases, in some cases I should say, the local authorities were in cahoots with the bootleggers. It was a wonderful way to do business, a wonderful partnership. So the Klan decided to take the law in their own hand. And they would run raids on stills, raids on beer gardens and other forms of alcohol on their own. Now, that form of do-goodism, of course, raises fundamental questions about the rule of law. We have some lawyers in here, and all of us, I think, respect and should respect the rule of law. So vigilante justice carried out by the Klan in the name of doing good raises another fundamental big issue for this organization. Oh, and then by golly, these young people were discovering sex. What is wrong with them? We always said we discovered in the 1960s, but they knew about it in the 20s. I used to say in class, I can't resist saying this, I taught Indiana history for years, and you do the pioneer period of Indiana, and you know Indiana in 1820, Indiana had the highest fertility rate in the world. And I'd put a chart on the board, and I'd say, those Hoosier pioneers must have known about sex. And the kids write it down like it's serious. What year did they discover that? Look at the ads for movie theaters in Bloomington papers, in any newspaper. And they're really pretty racy, I must say. They really are. And this is an ad for a movie called Flaming Youth. Flappers. Oh, these flappers. Oh, some people said they didn't even wear underwear. And the back seat of a Ford, a Model T. Disregard of conventions. Not doing what your parents told you. That, too, upset the Klan deeply. Another nail in the coffin for America. Another sign of decline of America. And the title of one of the chapters in this book, where I write about this stuff, is Going to Hell in a Handbasket. That's America. In the early 1920s, the Klan season. Now, I've worked on the Klan for many, many years, but I focused for 3 years on the Ku Klux Klan in Indiana. And I read all the primary sources I could get my hands on in that amount of time. And I came away with the conclusion that these folks were, most of them, genuine believers in the sort of issues that I've just talked about. Not all of them believed all of them, but most of them believed some of them. And some of them, all of them. Not everyone who joined the Klan. There were certainly people who joined the Klan just because their brother joined. There were people who joined the Klan because they thought it would be good for business. I'm a retail jeweler downtown, and I can advertise in the Klan newspaper or elsewhere, and I'll put the 3 initials KKK, and that'll help bring good people into my jewelry store. Some joined because they were pressured to join, social pressure. But most of the people, like these 4, were proud to be members of the Ku Klux Klan, standing proudly between the American flag and the Christian flag in 1924. Emphasized that women joined the Klan. We don't know as much about women Klan members as men, which is true of our history generally. We don't know much about women in just about any period or significant subject, because women's history is still developing. But women joined the Klan. You can't probably see the image well here, but all of these women in Newcastle have their hoods raised up, except one woman on the right side here. And I don't know why she kept her mask down, but she did for the photographer. Women played special roles, as they often did, in kind of domestic reform, in schools, in corruption, in local communities, in their churches. These are pieces of sheet music celebrating women and the Klan. This was a sophisticated business organization, not a bunch of rubes. This is the Klan manual. I remember the day I came across this in the Indiana Historical Society Library, where I did a fair bit of the research for this book. It's a thick manual, detailed, with how to run a local Clavern meeting, the songs to sing, always have fun, just don't do serious business, they tell their Klan leaders. Ritual for funerals and weddings, there were Klan weddings too. How to collect dues, how to sell Klan robes, all the aspects of running a serious organization in this manual. The Klan was very sophisticated in putting on performances, theatrical performances, above all parades. Fantastic parades, always with lots of American flags, with floats, with electric lit crosses. And here's downtown Bloomington, and you all can recognize the location there, just northeast of the square, as they get ready to march off in our lovely hometown. Parades. Parades almost always with a band, and this was the great era of marching bands. This, many said, was the finest Klan band in the state from Muncie, one of the best Klan bands in America. They traveled all over the Midwest. I love this photograph. You probably can't see very well. In the front left, there's a saxophone in the Klan band of Muncie. And I'd always assumed that the saxophone was kind of the instrument of the devil. You know, it seems a little sexy, doesn't it? But I guess it's okay. Maybe this is a hip Klan because they got a saxophone player. Conclaves, massive rallies, and this is the biggest one, maybe the biggest one in America by the Klan in the 1920s in Kokomo, over the July 4th days of 1923. A massive rally of games, of fun. They always had basketball contests, of speeches where Klan speakers said at great length the sorts of things I've been telling you about the enemy, about those people, and about the need to do good, to morally reform America. And a big parade, an initiation ceremony sometimes, and at nighttime, of course, the lighting of a cross, the burning of a cross, sometimes 3 crosses to end the ceremony, and these massive crowds of thousands of people go off into the summer night. The Klan produced its own sheet music. Here's one sung to the tune of their favorite hymn. The Klan produced its own phonograph recordings at Jeanette Studios in Richmond, Indiana. The same studio at almost the same time where a young black trumpet player from New Orleans named Louis Armstrong made his first recording. Jeanette Studios was open to anyone as long as their, as they say, money was green. The Klan made its own films, which showed in mainstream theaters and again in churches and clubs and venues. The Klan had its own newspaper called the Fiery Cross. It's digitized. You can spend as much time as you want in the Fiery Cross. For my sins, I had to spend weeks reading the Fiery Cross, but you might want to spend an hour or so, do some keyword searches. There's some reporting on Bloomington in there about some rallies and other events. It's a pretty good insight into what the Klan was selling. I chose to show you the issue of early November 1924, just after the general election that year, because this relates to another aspect of the Klan power politics. Excuse me. The Klan decided that the partnership that would serve them was not only with the Protestant churches, but with the Republican Party. Now, there were Democrats who were members of the Klan and who supported the Klan, but it was the Republican Party that really went into partnership with the Ku Klux Klan, a deep relationship that came to fruition in the general elections of 1924, where Klan candidates, Republicans, swept into power, so that the General Assembly that sat in January of 1925 had a majority of Klan members and sympathizers in it. Also, The governor elected in 1924, Ed Jackson, was a deep Klan ally. He and D.C. Stephenson, the Grand Dragon, were best of friends and got together to engage in bribery and other acts of criminality. Governor Jackson ought to have gone to jail. He was freed on a technicality. He is, I think, without any competition, the worst governor we've ever had in Indiana, Ed Jackson. I'd like to have an official state marker to Ed Jackson that would summarize some of what I just said. We tend not to do markers like that, do we? There's opposition to the Klan. I'd like to be able to say that from the very beginning, lots of Hoosiers stood up and shouted out, no, no, no. This is not Indiana. This is not Hoosier hospitality. This is not who we are. This 100% American stuff is just plain old bullshit. Oh, I said the word, did I? But they didn't. The opposition was very slight, very slow, and not very effective for a long time. It's a painful and difficult story. What is the story I tell? Because it's based upon the evidence. But there was opposition, and here we need to know there was opposition. There were always people who said, no, this is not right. Catholics, of course, for obvious reasons, were the most organized and outspoken of opponents of the Klan. They formed an organization first based in Chicago, the American Unity League, and then with headquarters in Indianapolis. And they sent out speakers to counter Daisy Douglas Barr and D.C. Stephenson and the other Klan recruiters and speakers. My favorite is the head of the AUL, Mad Pat O'Donnell, an Irish Catholic who was just hell on wheels on the podium from reports. And I like what he said in this quotation. The fight against the Klan is not a Jewish fight or a Negro's fight or a Catholic's fight, but an American fight. And I think, in my own personal view now, that is wisdom for our time. Any American who is the object of discrimination, of second-class citizenship. The fight is not the fight of his or her people like her. The fight is an American fight for all of us to be engaged in. So the issue of civil rights is not up to African Americans, it's up to Americans. Opposition. The AUL also had its own newspaper to counter the Fairy Cross. They broke into they had a wicked sense of humor, actually. You know those Catholics, they just know how to have fun. They broke into the headquarters of the Klan office in Indianapolis and stole the membership list and published the lists of names in the Fiery Cross, in the Tolerance newspaper. It now gives historians a list of names of who belonged to the Klan in Indianapolis. Here's a case of opposition. The Indiana Historical Society next year is going to open a You Are There exhibit on this story. By the way, Jean, my wife, and I just were at the Historical Society in Indianapolis on Saturday and saw the new You Are There exhibit on Eva Core, one of the great Hoosiers of all time, one of the great Americans of all time. And it is a phenomenally interesting exhibit, including a hologram that is world-class technology. So make it a day. They got a cafe there. You can have lunch and have a great time. There are other things to do there. So in 1924, in the May primary, after the Klan won the primary, they decided to have a celebration, a rally in South Bend, Indiana. Ooh, there's some Catholics in South Bend. And that's why they went. Just stick it in their face. We're going to have a big rally in downtown South Bend. Well, the president of Notre Dame, a nice Jesuit priest, heard about this, and he knew his students, and he said, he announced that no Notre Dame student will go downtown for the Notre Dame rally, for the Ku Klux Klan rally. Don't leave campus. You can't leave campus. Well, I think it's kind of nice that students disobey university presidents. As a graduate assistant, I went on strike in 1970, you know? Power to the people. Well, of course, the Notre Dame students went downtown. And they started by misdirecting the people coming from all over the northern Midwest away from the site of the rally, and there was a massive traffic jam. And then, more seriously, they started to pull off the robes of some of the Klan members, and here is one of them, a sophomore, Bill Fooey, wearing a Klan robe and just smiling to the sun because he has a trophy. Well, the Klan was outraged. This just proves the nature of Irish Catholics. Drunken, violent scum they were. And for weeks, the Fiery Cross reports on this riot. A few years later, the University of Notre Dame changed its nickname to Fighting Irish. Huh? Who had the last word on that one? Opposition. Opposition here, I love smart aleck IU students, at least when they're not in my classroom, but this is one of their publications in 1924, and you can't see the details here, I suspect, but they're making fun of the Klan in front of the student building. They've drawn these cartoons, and they're mocking the Klan, lynch them up, burn them up, string them up, etc. Student opposition. Young people who I think are still the hope of our nation and our future. The NAACP, a very important civil rights organization then, less so now, but leading the challenge to the Klan in many places where there were local branches of the NAACP standing up to the Klan. Some newspapers, most were silent or supportive, but some stood up to the Klan. The Notre Dame, the South Bend paper, the Fort Wayne Post-Gazette, a few others, and the Indianapolis Times, which won and we have a carrier of the Indianapolis Times in the audience here. The Times won a Pulitzer Prize for its investigation of the Klan. The Indiana Bar Association, I was really surprised because lawyers work in small towns and neighborhoods and have local people as their clients, but the Bar Association in 1923 passed a resolution condemning the Klan. Now, the lawyers were meeting at West Baden in 1923, and if you know anything about West Baden in the 1920s, you know that they may have been meeting there because booze flowed freely in French Lick and West Baden in those days. Here's the great tragedy, one of the greatest tragedies, and you probably know this story. This is D.C. Stephenson, a very, very, very powerful and smart leader. He didn't build the Klan in Indiana alone, but he was the major builder and very powerful, very, very friendly, a guy well met, a good salesman. Stephenson became the Grand Dragon of the Klan in Indiana, but also his power and influence way beyond Indiana, and a candidate for the President of the United States, many good Hoosiers and good Americans said. But in the fall of 1925, he was brought to trial in a Noblesville courtroom for the murder and rape of Madge Oberholzer, this young woman in the front row holding the dog. She's 10 or so years older when Stephenson raped and murdered her. That's what the trial decided. A jury of 12 white men decided, and Stephenson went off to the state penitentiary in Indiana at Michigan City. Now that tragedy was really bad news for the Klan. Of course it was. And you might think, and some people say and write, that that was the end of the Klan. What I learned, to my somewhat surprise, was that that's not true. That the Klan continued to function across Indiana in 1926 and 27 and even the 1928 elections. There were still Klan candidates and still being elected. It was a long, long decline even after Stephenson was behind bars in Michigan City. All right, I want to move quickly now. I want to say a few words about the more recent past after the Klan is dead. And by 1930, the Klan is dead. The Klan is gone by 1930. But just a few insights into what happened and maybe some connections. This guy some days is my favorite basketball player, Bill Garrett, All-American from Shelbyville, and some of you will have read the book called Getting Open. If you haven't, it's a very good story about Bill Garrett and Shelbyville and the high school basketball tournament and becoming a student at IU. Everywhere Bill Garrett played, from Bloomington to Ann Arbor to Champaign-Urbana, he was the only African-American on the court. You think he had a tough time? You think people shouted bad words at him? You bet your socks they did. And he persevered, and he was an All-American. Cheers to IU, and cheers especially to Herman Wells, who was responsible, who pushed Branch McCracken to get Bill Garrett here. But there's always more than one side to any story. I always look at this wonderful picture of the championship team of there were championships here before. A guy named, what's his name, Knight something? Harry Knight, I forget his name, came to IU. There were championships before then, and there will be after, soon. So, I need not tell you, this is an all-white team. What's wrong, Mr. McCracken, Coach McCracken? Okay, you got Bill Garrett here. That's it? One's enough? And was it the case there were no good black basketball players in Indiana? Well, those of you who know basketball know that 52 miles up the road is the best high school basketball team in the history of Indiana, with the best player in the history of Indiana, Oscar Robertson. I don't debate that either. Two things I won't debate. Abe Lincoln, the best of all time. Oscar Robertson, the best basketball player. I was playing basketball about the time Oscar Robertson was playing basketball. And goodness gracious, what a world of difference. After World War II, things begin to change. A lot of veterans come home, black veterans, but others, and say, we just fought a war against fascism. We fought a war for the 4 freedoms. Are there 4 freedoms in America for all Americans? No way. NAACP branch formed on the campus of Indiana University. And then by the 1960s, by the early 60s, a full-blown civil rights movement. Did it accomplish everything? Of course not. But I am convinced that that civil rights movement in federal legislation in 1964, 65, in all sorts of other ways, moved our country closer to liberty and justice for all, that it was a great achievement of Americans, ordinary Americans, not Martin. Martin Luther King's important, of course. Honor him, celebrate. But the real story of the civil rights movement is at the grassroots level. We know bits and pieces of it here in Monroe County. We need to know a lot more about that. We need some markers. We need some markers honoring those who worked for justice in Monroe County. This movement was so successful that it created a backlash. Some whites began to say, whoa, wait a minute, those people have gone too far. They've gotten too much. It's a zero-sum game, and they've taken it from me. They've threatened my white male privilege. And in my case, they've threatened, our white privilege, and in my case, my white male privilege. They've gone too far. We got to slow it down. We got to stop them. We got to turn this around. One of my favorite photographs in Indiana history. You may remember when George Corley Wallace came to Indiana in the 1964 presidential primary, a segregationist governor from Alabama, who was a pioneer of the politics of rage. It's a wonderful biography of Wallace if you're interested. Who was a pioneer at using what we now call dog whistles, not using the N-word, but really saying it in other ways, not favoring segregation, but actually favoring segregation. And he got a significant percentage of the white vote in Indiana in 1964. His headquarters were the Claypool Hotel in downtown Indianapolis, and here are African-American NAACP folks protesting against George Corley Wallace. But I want to force your eye to the lone white male there waving his flag. Some people still want to believe, this is the bedtime story, folks, that this is the flag of heritage, the flag of my ancestors who fought at Shiloh and Gettysburg, and it doesn't mean anything of consequence for our own time. Well, first of all, I'm not sure I want to honor that heritage. My great-great-grandfather, William Pendleton Madison, was a cavalry soldier in the Shenandoah Valley for the Confederacy. And I'm pretty sure I know now where his grave is. And when I can get a chance to get there, I'm going to put an American flag on it and redeem him from his treason. This is the flag, not of heritage. You couldn't find this flag in 1940, in 1920, except in a handful of small places. Only after the civil rights movement began in the late 50s, and especially in the 60s and beyond, did folks begin to fly this Confederate battle flag. It became, and it is today, the flag of white supremacy, the flag of racism. Now, I will grant that there's some people out there who like this flag and fly this flag and think that they're honoring heritage or great-great-grandfather or whatever. But it's a mistaken use of a flag that is primary, the symbol of white racism. I used to give the middle digit, which I don't do very often, when I saw that flag on certain places. And my wife made me stop it because she's much nicer than I am. She also said that guy probably has a gun in his truck. So if you fly it now, I may stick my tongue out, but I won't do anything else. But you know, I'm entitled to my opinion, aren't I? I'm a citizen of the United States with freedom of speech, as you are. And if you want to believe something else about this flag of treason and white racism, go ahead. You're wrong, but go ahead, believe it. All right, I got to get back on track. What this means is that a space was created. The civil rights movement, for all excesses, created a space for an effort to revive the Klan. There had always been fears from 1930 that this thing would come back. And every time it tried, it was put down. And it wasn't tried very much until the late 60s and 70s. And then flyers like this, and I love this one. This is from Evansville, but you can't read it, but it inviting people to join the Klan, blah, blah, blah. Pride, honor, fight. To keep America white and free. I love that conjunction. Keep America white and free. Those are connected. Free and white and free. That's what America is, according to the folks who send this around. And these flyers have appeared in Bloomington and elsewhere down to our own time. Attempts to revive the Klan that failed. Because when they held a rally, as they often did, including here in Bloomington, it was only a handful of guys and women who showed up in Klan regalia. Almost always there were far more people opposing the rally. They gave their speeches, and they were not at all shy about using the N-word. In the 1990s, they began to attack LGBT people, some immigrants, but always the number one enemy of this third Klan were African Americans. They are white supremacists through and through, and they are not teachable. These are not the people who formed the Klan in the 1920s. They are as different as night and day. They are rubes. They are fools. They are ignorant. Some of them are mentally unbalanced. In fact, I think a fair number of them are. But they're fascinating, you know. They still fascinate us. And again, I'm sorry you can't see the details. Some of these photographs are in the book. This one is, because I love it so much. Here's the guy in the center, and here we have a new version of protest, of white supremacy. This is the militia style, the military style. And some of these guys are veterans. They're old fat veterans in this case. He has the Klan insignia on his arm, and here he has the Confederate battle flag, the flag of heritage, but of course the flag of white racism. But I like this one because the guy on the left with the sunglasses, his poster. And some of you may have been copy editors or English teachers or whatever, or a history professor, where you try to teach students a few things that separate civilians from civilized people from barbarians. One of them, I'd tell students, is the use of the word it's. There are two ways to spell it's. And it's very confusing and it's very difficult. And even the best spell checker doesn't always get it right these days. But certainly not one of the choices I''T''S, as this guy made his. So these are real people. You know, this is not outside agitators coming in here. Small, inconsequential. Maybe, except that they open up the possibility that someone would believe some of the rot that they're selling, that it's okay to say some of the things they say, to use the N-word or other slurs the way they used them. Here are 3 Americans observing that parade. They probably know how to spell it's. I want to focus on the woman in the middle, embracing her son, watching these unteachables go by. How is she going to explain this to her son? He's what, 4 or 5? And how and what is she going to say to him when he turns 16 and he has a driver's license and he can drive from Anderson to Carmel? Where I've had students of color tell me in the last 15 years, they've been picked up, they've been stopped for driving while black. It is a fact of life, folks. And it's even more sometimes not just stopped by police if you're driving where you shouldn't be and are African American. So what is she going to tell her son? This is the talk. Generations of African American parents have had this talk with their children. This third Klan talked a lot of nasty stuff about violence. Usually they were too stupid and disorganized to do anything, but occasionally they did. A handful of them, 2 of them, got some dynamite and firebombed the black market on Kirkwood. And I remember when that happened. I remembered the scars that it left in this community. And of course, there is an official state historical marker on the site of that firebombing in People's Park on Kirkwood Avenue, and that is a great, great thing to have. I remember when Carol Jenkins was murdered in Martinsville. A deep scar on that community which has not healed today. Go around the ring counties around Indianapolis, look at the economic data, per capita income, schooling, business attraction. Morgan County, Martinsville County seat, not the same as the others. Why? Why? And in our own time in Charlottesville, Virginia, in 2017, a massive rally of white supremacists. And here we have it, the Ku Klux Klan, the insignia over the heart, white, KKK. They're down to one issue now, racism. The colored people are taking over. White people are in decline. And on the right, the militia style, which at times, as here, segs into neo-Nazi kind of style. You know, my father spent a long time in Europe in 1944-45 fighting against the Nazis, and this deeply, deeply grieves me that we can have Americans who think the Nazis, or even Putin for that matter, were not so bad. Closer to home, this guy in the center is Matt Heimbach from Paoli, Indiana. He was one of the major organizers of the Charlottesville rally. Matt Heimbach was a college graduate, a history major, not at IU, thank God. We did produce in the IU History Department a Holocaust denier. Don't spread that around. A very smart, guy, superb at using social media. The new threat to our democracy in so many ways. A force for great good and a force for great evil, and Matt Heimbach was a master at it. Played a major role. A very violent racist at a rally in 2016 in Louisville, Kentucky. He punched a black woman in the face. That's the kind of guy Matt Heimbach is. Finally, I'm going to stop with 2 words of wisdom. I love this sculpture. It's in the Meyer Sculpture Garden outside of Grand Rapids. It's a wonderful trip to do. Probably need to stay overnight. And Grand Rapids is a pretty neat city in many ways. And this sculpture garden is well worth a day of visit, and you want to see listening to history. The English artist tells us here that the human head can be bound with cords that cover the eyes and bind the book of history over the ears so that the human cannot see, cannot read, cannot hear, cannot listen to history, to our past. Cannot listen to our past in its full form, not just the bedtime stories that make us feel good, but all our stories, all our good, not so good, and evil stories that, of course, include the Ku Klux Klan. And the story I've told you today is a story of some good, a lot of evil. It is a story, I think, that is not on the edge, on the margin. It is a story right in the center. The U.S. history textbooks should have a chapter on the Ku Klux Klan, not a little box on the side, and should explain fully to students what it is. Listening to our history. The greatest American of all time, remember? And these 4 students know that very well. I taught them history during the first months of the COVID. They're my grandchildren, and they were very good students. We studied all kind of interesting things together on Zoom. And if you ask them who's the greatest American of all time, they'd shout, Abraham Lincoln. Some of them have Lincoln t-shirts and Lincoln socks. But here's the great question to leave you with. Is the moral arc of the universe bending toward justice? Not consistently. It doesn't need to be every day. We may have ups and downs. But is the arc generally bending toward justice and equality for all? Some days, I think it's not. Most days, I think it is. But that's for you as a citizen in a democracy to understand, to think about, to know about, because our democracy, in my opinion, is in significant peril as we speak. Okay, here's my email address. Again, you can disagree with me, you can challenge me right now, however long you want to stay. I go to dinner at 5:30 with some friends tonight. We're old, we eat early. But the floor is open for comment and question. Thank you. Pam?
I am so struck by the parallels of this to today, whether it's conspiracy theory, fake news, feel-good news, patriotic news. Are the KKK of the past today's QAnon people?
Well, I sometimes talk about, I stopped doing that. I used to talk, I've been on a Klan Road show for I don't know how long now. And it's been very interesting. I've had a lot of good comments and questions. And I've thought about things myself I should have thought about earlier that people ask me and say to me. Yes, the simple answer is QAnon is. Proud Boys are. But I would like to add, and I used to show a slide I don't show anymore, of some of the current candidates for being descendants of the Ku Klux Klan. And they wear nice silk blouses and nice pressed Brooks Brothers shirts and nice suits and ties. They look very, very respectable. Some of them even serve in office. Some of them graduated from Harvard or Yale, from the law schools at those institutions. Some of them know better. Okay, I got tenure. You can't fire me. Actually, I don't have tenure anymore. I don't have a job. Josh Hawley, who studied with David Kennedy at Stanford. Do I have the right guy? I think I do. David Kennedy at Stanford is one of the finest historians of our generation. He was in Professor Kennedy's history seminar. Josh Cayley, as a history major at Stanford, learned history. He knows what he's saying is bullshit. So what's the conclusion? My conclusion is he's so desperate. I'm sorry, I don't want to pick on an individual. Strike that name. I didn't say that. Deny it. Some of these people are so desperate to be reelected, or they are evil. And I resist that label. None of us are evil. All of us are redeemable in whatever ways. But boy, I'm starting to think some of these people are really evil in what they're saying that has no basis in truth. It's an assault in so many ways, but for me, it's an assault on the craft of history. I spent a lot of time learning how to be a historian, and it's not that complicated. You gotta find the primary sources, the facts. You gotta put them in context. You gotta not believe you don't believe anything you read until you can verify, until you can coordinate and put it together in a reasonable narrative form. And so all of this stuff is really an attack on me as a historian. That's not the big story. The big story is an attack on our democracy. Sorry, that was a political opinion. I was not speaking as a historian. I was speaking as a citizen, which I have the right to do, but so do you. So, Clay.
You're quite right that there'll probably never be a historical marker in Orleans near in Jackson's tombstone.
I forgot he was buried there. Thank you.
There is a little bit of in that on his tombstone, one of the dates is incorrect, and they have corrected it, and it's obviously a flaw on the stone, and I find that significant.
So the date is wrong, and they made the date correct, and it's now.
It's professionally done, but it's obviously a mistake that's been corrected.
We can correct mistakes from the past. That's the message. Yes, back here.
I recently read an article about Herman B. Wells and the way he managed to integrate the Gables, which was a private company. And I think maybe Bill Garrett was the reason behind it. Do you know the story?
Yeah, well, you're right. Herman Wells, most of you know this story, and I think Jim Capshue's coming soon, right? Is that? Oh. Okay, well, he'll be much better at telling all of this than I am, but Herman Wells was a force for justice and equality. But not out there in your face, very quiet behind the scenes. And he did the arrangements that allowed African Americans to go to the Gables. I spent a lot of time in the Gables in the 1960s. I could usually only afford a cup of coffee, but that was good enough. He led quietly the movement that put a clamp on white barbers in Bloomington who would not cut African American hair, or in one notorious instance, really scalped a guy, did horrible damage deliberately to a black student. And in other ways, Herman Wells led the fight, the good fight, in so many ways. He was a member of First Methodist Church, and he gave a wonderful talk. I have a transcript of it somewhere, to First Methodist in the late 1940s, saying, basically, okay, folks, it's time we put up or shut up. It's time to do the work of our religious belief. It was a very forceful talk. Yes, in the back.
Was there any correlation between the Klan and the destroying of the Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma?
No, that happened before the Klan really, that's 1919, 1920, and the Klan was still just forming then. So it was not a Klan act of violence, one of the most violent tragedies in our history, Tulsa, Oklahoma, where white folks just ran through the African American neighborhoods and did horrendous damage. But the ideals behind that evil action were the kind the Klan picked up on. So yes, I'm going to go over here in just a minute. Way back there in the corner, please.
Thank you, Jim. I was wanting to clarify, you said something about the Klan wasn't doing damage or evil or whatever, but then it sounded like you meant just in the 20s. Did I misunderstand that?
No, that's what I wanted to say. I can't remember anything I said before, so. In the 20s, the Klan did very, very little violence, very, very little serious violence. In the last half century, they have done bits and pieces of violence, and I gave you 2 examples, and there's some other examples, but they were never, thank goodness, large enough in number in the last half century, never organized enough. They could never pull off the kind of violence that they threatened in our own time. Now, has this gone away? No, it hasn't. There's still violent people out there, and there still might be a possibility, but no. Yes, here.
The Thomas Hart Benton murals at IU, with the questionable ones in, I believe, Woodburn.
Woodburn 100.
What's the status, what's happening with that, and how does that compare and conflict with what we had talked about?
This is, some of you, I hope all of you know, the wonderful Thomas Hart Benton murals that he painted in the 1930s. That, again, because they were in a cow barn at the state fairgrounds, and Herman Wells talked to the governor and said, "What are you going to do with those?" He said, "Well, they're just in the cow barn." He said, "You want them?" And Dr. Wells said, "Sure." And he brought them down to this new auditorium that was just opening on campus, and they're in the foyer of the auditorium up around. But there's several panels in other places, including in Woodburn 100. I always taught the big freshman survey history class in the fall semester. I said to younger colleagues, you want to get them right off the turnip truck from Kokomo. So you can tell them, this is serious work, and you got to show up, and they're no blah, blah, blah. Kind of things old people always say to young people, But I taught in that classroom because I wanted to teach there. And the mural in contest, the mural controversy is one on the left as you face, and it depicts many things in this one brilliant mural, including the back, marching Klan people in hoods and robes with a cross and a fire cross. Now, people don't want to see that. They don't want to be in that classroom because it offends them, they say, students and some faculty, and more so in recent years. It hurts their feelings. Okay. Maybe if I were black or Jewish or Catholic, my feelings would be hurt too. And I'm going to not dismiss that. On the other hand, I think the feelings of the 3 young people who were murdered in the Freedom bus in Alabama, more than their feelings were hurt. I think the little black girl that Will Counts took the wonderful picture of, I think her feelings were really hurt. The problem, however, is not hurt feelings. The problem is accuracy, because Benton's mural is a criticism of the Klan. It's an attack on the Klan. And if you look at it, first of all, you'd have to read and know a little bit about Benton and his own political views. But he was strongly opposed to the Klan. And the mural, in the details, and I don't have a photograph readily available, I can't go through this, you have to do it yourself. It's available online readily. And I wrote an essay about this somewhere, because this has come up again and again at IU. It's an attack on the Klan. It is a depiction that is against the Klan. But in order to do that, you have to stop and look and think and maybe have a teacher explain it to you. And we haven't been able to do that over many, many years of controversy. So the consequence is Woodburn 100 is now closed. Woodburn 100 has been canceled. Maybe. Well, they can't take them down because that was a proposal. They're too fragile. The conservatives say if you took them down, you'd destroy them. It's a problem. And I'm not being entirely fair to those who don't want the, my proposal, and I was on a committee 20 years ago to study this, my proposal, half serious, half not, was to put a black curtain over the mural. And you know, it's like banned books. If you got a black curtain over the mural, wouldn't every student want to look behind the curtain and see what's there? I still think that's a pretty good idea because it's a great classroom. 424 seats, you know? Over here.
Share with us your thinking about history and all the statues that
Boy, you folks are asking the questions about the taking down of statues like Robert E. Lee in Virginia, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. My first serious statement about that is that's up for the people in the community to decide. I think that's a question of local government, democratic local decision-making through processes that give voices to all. I can understand taking down some of those statues. I'd have no trouble tearing down with my own hands the statue of Nathan Bedford Forrest. Look him up if you don't know. Nathan Bedford Forrest orders his men at the Battle of the Crater to murder in cold blood black Union prisoners of war. That's a horrendous war crime. He led the revival of the Ku Klux Klan, deeply celebrated among those with Confederate heritage. I think he was a traitor. He should have been tried and executed. And his statue finally was moved out of Memphis just a year or so ago. Robert E. Lee, well, you know, I could debate that a lot of different ways. I think he got a lot more attention than he deserved. You know, he wasn't that great a military leader. Some scholars say he made a lot of errors. And there were other, you know, he was a slave owner, but so were my ancestors in Virginia. Not the one who fought in the Civil War. He was a poor dirt farmer. That's a complicated question, but I think we ought to address it. We have a statue on the state grounds in Indianapolis of Thomas Hendricks, the first Democratic governor after the Civil War. By our standards, a white racist supreme, even by the standards of his day. It's the tallest statue on the Capitol grounds in Indianapolis. I'd like to have a different statue there. That's the other thing. Every generation writes its own history, has the obligation and the privilege of writing its own history, of picking who are our heroes today. And if we don't like the heroes chosen in 1900 or 1922, let's get our own heroes. Why is it such a big deal? What God proclaims that Robert E. Lee is the saint of the Confederacy? Let's get our own heroes. I am glad that the monument on our square is being redone, though. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that beautiful? No. The question is what I think about the violence committed by the Black Lives Movement and the Antifa movement. I'm not an expert on that, and so I shouldn't say anything, but I think it's, in the scheme of violence in America, America in 400 years has had immense violence, including the Civil War, which I remind you is a civil war in which Americans killed Americans. That's the most violent, but we've had lots of violence. No, I'm not saying this over. And maybe the Black Lives Movement should not be over. Sorry. Oh, okay. Well, as I said, you as an American, as a human being, you can believe whatever you want. Are there evil people in Antifa? I'm not even sure what Antifa is. In fact, I'm not sure anyone quite can explain what Antifa is. And maybe some of it's made up by certain news outlets. I don't know. I don't follow that stuff. No, I support the goals of Black Lives Matter. Antifa, I don't know what Antifa is. I don't think Antifa exists. Yeah, okay. Well, okay. No, I'm going to move on to someone else and just say I'm not informed enough to have a good opinion on that. I am informed on another kind of violence, however, since the subject's on the table, the violence of January 6th, which I think is the most important violence in our life. Yes, in the way back.
More locally, Hope Township and Chapel Hill used to be known as a pretty lawless area.
Yeah.
And there were vigilante groups known as White Cappers.
Yep.
Is there any connection between the White Cappers and the Klan?
The White Cappers were unorganized but significant in many parts of Indiana, including in parts of Monroe County in the late 19th century. Vigilante, taking the law into their own hands, doing some of the same things the Klan did, that is, men who abused their wives, et cetera, et cetera. And again, white capping, vigilante violence challenges our essential need for rule of law. So it's dangerous. It wasn't a huge organized movement, but some of the same notions about vigilante justice that the White Cappers had are picked up by the Klan in the 1920s. So again, the Klan doesn't invent a whole lot of new stuff. They pick up on what earlier generations had produced and done. Yeah. Okay. I'll listen. Yes. Again, a sophisticated organization. Radio is just coming in. I have a reference in the Fiery Cross to a radio broadcast, a Klan radio broadcast from Bloomington, Indiana in 1924 or 25. I can't remember the exact details now, but yes, they're very smart. They pick up on the newest technology. They would have been all over Twitter and TikTok. And they picked up on radio, and there was a move to begin a Klan radio, a national Klan radio station, and it happened just as the Klan was beginning to lose its power and finances. Yeah, radio for sure.
Yeah, you talked about the power of the Klan and hunting. I look at a lot of old newspapers. I was looking at local newspapers. I think the year was 24. The Monroe County Fair was on the square in those days. And to control traffic, they had Klansmen in full regalia directing traffic instead of the police. Now, a lot of those people may have been police.
Some might have been, yeah.
But anyway, the idea of seeing that would be weird.
Yeah, that's a good example. Mike's talking about State Fair on the Square in the early 1920s. County Fair. And the Klan was directing traffic downtown because they were good Hoosiers. They were doing volunteer work. And that is part of the larger point. Again, these are not marginal in the 1920s. They're not wacko. They are good, God-fearing, law-abiding, mostly Hoosiers doing what they think is the good thing. And that's why, in my understanding, the Klan is so significant and so demands our understanding today and the possible connections between the 1920s and the 21st century. I think I'll stop there. I'm happy to answer individual questions if you wish, but thank you for your attention. Thank you.